You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja.
We love the herb.
It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, November 30th, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. It's almost the end of 2017. Can you believe it's the end of November already? And heading into December, there's not going to be a whole lot of podcasts. I've been telling people all week my Jamaican, Dallas, Las Vegas vacation begins on December 5th. So we're not going to do a show on the Monday either. So first 2 weeks of December, I'll be out. We'll be off the air for 2 weeks, coming back on Tuesday, December 19th. So just wanted to let you know that. So when you didn't get a new podcast coming in or didn't see the new live feed, you didn't freak out. Oh my God, is the show gone? Did Russ die? What happened? No, everything's fine. It didn't get busted. Just finally taking some time off, traveling without having to do a marijuana gig, just kicking my feet up, enjoying some rum punch and some Jamaican ganja for a couple weeks. So we got that going on, plus going to visit the folks at DFW Normal and the Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo Parlor in Fort Worth, Texas. And then on the way home, stop in Las Vegas and catch the Las Vegas Bowl with, cross my fingers, the Boise State Broncos playing. So it'll be a pretty good vacation. But until then, we've got a couple more shows today and tomorrow to get to. And let's start by talking about the radical rant today, because coming up at the end of the show, I just got a copy of Washington State's recommendations, their guidelines. They have these meetings and public comment periods and fact-finding missions to Colorado, Oregon, and Rhode Island to try to figure out how Washington State can do what 7 other states have already allowed, and that is allow cannabis home grow. And wait till I tell you about what they are suggesting. It is ridiculous. Also coming up on the show today, we will be playing an interview from July that we did with Sergeant Steve Miller. He's with Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and he came on the show to talk about civil asset forfeiture reform, you know, where the cops can take your stuff without convicting you of a crime. That's coming up in our Police for Reform segment. In What in the News, we're going to talk a little bit about the little-known cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. National Public Radio just recently did a story on that. And of course, we'll start everything off right now with the cannabis headline news.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Thursday, November 30th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced Wednesday that White House counselor Kellyanne Conway will be the point person for the Trump administration's opioid crisis efforts. President Donald Trump tapped Conway to help, quote, change the perception about opioids and reduce addictions and death, Sessions said at a press briefing about the Justice Department's efforts to combat the crisis. Sessions said Trump had made the epidemic, quote, a top priority for his administration, including every senior official and cabinet member, end quote. Conway worked as a pollster before becoming Trump's campaign manager, and she now serves as a White House spokeswoman and Trump surrogate. She has no formal experience in drug policy or law enforcement. In the past, she has shared Sessions and Trump's views that on defeating drug abuse, strict prevention programs, saying, quote, the best way to stop people from dying from overdoses and drug abuse is by not starting in the first place, end quote. She told Fox News in October, echoing the failed just say no policies Sessions holds in great regard. U.S. Department of Justice officials met to discuss potential changes to federal marijuana enforcement policy this week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced. Quote, we're working on that very hard right now, he said on Wednesday, continuing, we had meetings yesterday and talked about it at some length. It's my view that the use of marijuana is detrimental and we should not give encouragement in any way to it. And it represents a federal violation which is in the law and is subject to being enforced, and our priorities will have to be focused on all the things and challenges that we face, end quote. Sessions, a longtime vocal opponent of marijuana legalization, previously said that the Obama policy on state marijuana laws remains in effect while the Department of Justice reviews potential changes. The Ohio Department of Commerce announced 12 winners of Level 1 cultivation licenses for up to 25,000 square feet of growing space for cannabis. Members of and advisors to the winning companies include Cleveland businessman Andy Rayburn from Buckeye Relief, Columbus developer Bill Schottenstein from Pure Ohio Wellness, Governor John Kasich's former spokesman Chris Schrimp from Cresco Labs, and investors in Ohio's 2015 failed marijuana legalization campaign, Chris Stock and Brian Kessler from Riviera Creek Holdings, according to records released by the Commerce Department. One company, CannAscend, is already threatening to challenge the results. CannAscend members Ian James and Jimmy Gould, who co-founded Responsible Ohio in the 2015 marijuana legalization effort, said they uncovered significant problems with the application process. National Public Radio broadcast a report on the rare vomiting illness called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. The condition affects a small subset of long-term daily cannabis consumers and appears infrequently enough that many doctors are unaware of its existence. There's no hard data on the prevalence of the illness, but in California and Colorado, which have loosened marijuana laws in recent years, some emergency physicians say they're seeing it more often. One study in Colorado suggests there may be a link. Doctors say it's difficult to treat the condition. There is no cure other than to quit using marijuana. Doctors can do little to relieve the symptoms since traditional anti-nausea medications often don't work and there are no pills to prevent the onset of an episode. One surefire sign of the illness is when patients find relief in hot showers and baths. Toxicologists say the heat may distract the brain from pain receptors in the abdomen, but like the syndrome itself, the phenomenon is not very well understood. Republican Governor Scott Walker has quietly signed a bill that allows Wisconsin farmers to grow industrial hemp. The bill passed the legislature unanimously. The measure's sponsor, Representative Republican Jesse Kramer, tweeted Thursday that the bill will make Wisconsin a leader in hemp production. At least 30 other states have legalized hemp farming, defined as cannabis plants with less than 0.3% THC. The law prohibits any farmer with a previous drug conviction from growing industrial hemp, which is not a drug. Minnesotans with autism and obstructive sleep apnea will be able to use medical marijuana as of next July to manage their medical conditions, announced State Health Commissioner Dr. Ed Ellinger. Advocates requested that 10 conditions be added, including anxiety and dementia, to Minnesota's medical cannabis program. Ellinger said the evidence was strongest for these two. Cannabis Headline News for Thursday, November 30th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. The Marijuana Agenda is a listener-supported independent podcast brought to you by Radical Russ Media, LLC. Subscribe to our VIP feed at mjagenda.com for access to our ad-free podcast segment archive. Make a one-time donation to support the Marijuana Agenda at paypal.me/radicalruss. You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I was told by the DART task force in Toledo that they're actually sprinkling fentanyl on marijuana now.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
People should say no to drug use.
It's really, really easy.
Adding more gasoline to the fire.
Lackadaisical.
Really tough, really big, really great.
To infect and rot our nation vomited.
Dangerous and gateway drugs.
We don't need to be legalizing marijuana.
To build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society.
In the news.
Well, today in the news, I want to start off with that story from National Public Radio on the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, because this is something that's kind of not well understood, not only in the medical community, but in our own cannabis community. And a lot of people brush this off and think that it doesn't exist, or it's a hoax, or it's something that the man is trying to do to throw us off or to make marijuana look bad. And I caution everyone to take this seriously. This is a real thing. I've spoken to people who have experienced this problem, and it's not fun. This hyperemesis, which just means a lot of vomiting. Emesis means to vomit, right? So hyperemesis, a lot of vomiting going on. And it strikes a subset, just a small group of people. And they can't tell why some of us get it and some of us don't. But a small subset of us daily cannabis consumers who consume lots of cannabis every day, small subset get this terrible syndrome, which is characterized by the extreme vomiting and just nausea and just pain, right? And the only cure for it is to stop smoking pot. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, especially daily cannabis consumers, because there's the well understood fact that medical cannabis use is often recommended for nausea. We recommend it to people going through chemo, right? And so cannabis consumers who know that and believe that have trouble understanding that there could be an anti effect, that they could be going the other way, that you could be causing a sort of nausea. But this fits along with some of the other studies and some of the other effects we found from cannabis in our discussions with Dr. Mitch Earlywine over the years. We've talked about how there's studies showing when it comes to using cannabis for pain management, if you overdo it, the pain is actually worse. Like there's this kind of sweet spot you got to find when you're using cannabis, where you got to use enough that it kills the pain. But if you use too much, it causes almost like a greater sensitivity to the pain. So the concept here is that, at least in my view, using phytocannabinoids, the cannabis we smoke or eat, is kind of flooding our endocannabinoid system, or boosting, if you will, our endocannabinoid system, which is great, right? It gives you the high, it gives you the relaxation, the munchies, the end of spasms and seizures and so forth. Wonderful thing. But if you overflood it, you have a reaction, you have a pushback from your body's endocannabinoid system and the other systems that are flooded with too much, too often when it comes to cannabinoids. And, you could kind of analogize it to a car, right? You give a car the gas and it takes off, but you give the car too much gas, it floods and it stops. So it's not too weird of a concept to think that if you're overdoing it with the cannabis, it could cause this cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And this was first diagnosed. I mean, this is new. This is like only 13 years that doctors have had any understanding of this. It's first diagnosed down in Australia. And when they first came up with the cases of this, they had trouble teasing it out from just a standard hyperemesis syndrome. There is a regular hyperemesis syndrome that just anybody can get. That and then sometimes there's the post or the prenatal hyperemesis syndromes too, where the women get morning sickness, right? So there's lots of different versions of hyperemesis, and they couldn't figure out why these people who were otherwise healthy were getting it. They finally figured out, oh, look, they're all pot smokers. Now, one of the ways you can tell that you've got this cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome and you don't have just a flu or something is that a hot shower or a hot bath almost always and almost immediately brings relief to the people who have the syndrome. And here, again, doctors aren't quite sure why. In the story from NPR, there's some toxicologists quoted as saying, well, the heat may be distracting the pain receptors in the gut. I don't know. But that's what the people who have suffered from this and the ones that I've talked to have said, yeah, a hot shower does the trick. So let's be aware of this syndrome and let's not dismiss it. And let's understand that there are times when you may need to stop smoking pot for a while. And it's not just the emesis syndrome. I mean, just the hypertolerance you can get, right? You can get to the point where you're smoking so much because, well, you've built your system's tolerance up so much that you need more and more. And the longer that goes on, the closer you get to the possibility of the hyperemesis syndrome. So slow down, man. Take a break. Take a chill. And there's a lot of people have been doing this. Our friend Ron Funches, the comedian, was on social media talking about, and he's well known for being a pothead, right? Took a break, like a month-long break. Joe Rogan did the same thing recently. Woody Harrelson says he's stopped smoking marijuana. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think sometimes in our culture, we have this worry that like who we are is stoners or potheads or cannabis consumers or patients or whatever name you use for yourself, but that's somehow defined by our use, right? And this is the mistake our opponents make too. They say, we can ban pot, we can make it illegal because you shouldn't do that. It's an action we're banning, not a people. I disagree. I think we're a people. I think if I stopped smoking pot tomorrow, forget about that. I'm headed to Jamaica. But if I stopped smoking pot tomorrow, the next week I'd still be me. I'd still be a cannabis consumer. I'd still be a cannabis activist and advocate. So this is, I think the problem some people run into is they don't want to lose their identity by they want to stay in denial. The NPR story talked about people, some consumers who refused to believe it could be cannabis and continued using cannabis and kept getting the hyperemesis syndrome. So let's just be aware of it. Tell folks that it really does exist. And it doesn't mean, as far as I understand on this so far, it doesn't mean that you have to stop smoking pot permanently. You maybe need to just reset your endocannabinoid system. And perhaps we're finding out more about this and learning more about this, I believe, because of the advent and popularity and broader acceptance of cannabinoid concentrates. I think this is having, and edibles to some extent, but I really think, when you peruse YouTube and you see these 20-something young men doing 1 gram dabs, right? You do that every day. Would be surprised if you'd come up with a cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. All right, let me wind up what in the news. I ranted about this yesterday, kind of an impromptu rant because it had just happened. But the lead story today, Kellyanne Conway being the White House Opioid Czar. You might as well make me Treasury Secretary. I have as much understanding of the United States Treasury as Kellyanne Conway has about the opioid crisis. So it's just insane. And the reaction here as this was being announced was, we're tapping Kellyanne Conway to show how serious we are about this. So we're putting the top people on it. No, you're not. You're just putting people that are loyal to you, people that you can guarantee will regurgitate these failed 1980s drug policies of just say no. The best way to stop people from dying from overdoses and drug abuse is by not starting in the first place. That's her quote. That's just say no, expanded a little bit. Well, yeah, the best way to stop people from dying from a drug overdose is if they've never taken drugs. Just like the best way to stop teenagers from getting pregnant is if they never have sex. And the best way to stop from ever being hit by a car is to never leave your home. And the best way to never die in a plane accident is to never fly in a plane. But we live in the real world, Kellyanne Conway. We live in the real world where people have already started. It's too late to tell them to just say no. They've already said yes. It's as insane and impractical to think that you can fight an ongoing opioid overdose crisis with 64,000 annual deaths by telling people just don't start taking opioids, as it is to tell a whole bunch of teenagers, hey, just don't have sex and none of you ever get pregnant. Because some of them teenagers are going to have sex, and some of these people are going to end up with an addiction to opioids. Whether they start from getting pain pills illicitly from friends, or one of them gets loaned a pill now and then, or get their prescription, get out of the hospital, keep taking them, move on to the street level stuff. It's going to happen. What do we do for those people? Basically, the just say no stance on the opioid overdose crisis is tantamount to saying, just go die. Just say no might as well be just go die. Because that's what's going to happen. People are going to die. We're going to have another 60,000, 70,000, 80,000 deaths. How many more before we can get somebody with some knowledge, some experience, and some real-world policy work in the drug policy arena on this issue.
Well, that was really horrible.
Oh, you're always complaining!
All right, that sound means it's 20 after the hour, 4:20 in America's cannabis capital of Denver, Colorado, where everybody's feeling Rocky Mountain High, I hope. We've got to take a break. When we come back, we've got Police for Reform on civil asset forfeiture. But first, our anti-drug public service announcement of the day, warning you about drugs in the suburbs. If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
The International Cannabis Business Conference is headed to Hawaii. Get your tickets now for the year's best cannabis industry island retreat this December 1st through 3rd. Kauai Grand Hyatt hosts the 3-day ICBC, which begins with a VIP reception featuring cannabis comedian Doug Benson. The ICBC features exhibitor booths, keynote speeches, and informative panels with industry experts and regulatory officials. Then, when it's all said and done, kick back for the incredible after party with music by reggae legends Morgan Heritage. There's also a singles golf tournament you can play on Monday, sponsored by Leafly Endured Ventures. Log on to internationalcbc.com to get more information and buy your tickets now. Special discount hotel rates are in effect, so act fast. That's internationalcbc.com for the International Cannabis Business Conference. Aloha.
Now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
Statistics show that 40% of all kids who smoke marijuana live in the city. Guess where the other 60% live?
This has been an actual anti-drug public service announcement. To combat this and other drug war hysteria, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific at live.mjagenda.com or download the free podcast at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
This is Police for Reform, brought to you by Law Enforcement Action Partnership at LEAP.cc. LEAP is a group of law enforcement professionals advocating for criminal justice reforms in the areas of drug prohibition, mass incarceration, asset forfeiture, community policing, and more. LEAP provides qualified speakers across the world to speak with authority on criminal justice issues. We visit with one such speaker now in Police for Reform.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Police for Reform, the podcast for Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I'm Russ Belville. Joining us today, we have Steve Miller, who's a retired sergeant who worked 20 years as a law enforcement officer, preceded by 4 years in Air Force security. So thank you for your service and welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Steve, one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you today was to get an expert's point of view on the most recent developments coming from the Department of Justice. And that namely would be Jeff Sessions, our Attorney General, calling for greater seizures through asset forfeiture. And I was hoping you could explain to our audience exactly what he's talking about. What is this asset forfeiture, and how do the feds and the states use this against marijuana consumers?
Well, they use it against marijuana consumers because if they can put a case against you for delivery, manufacture of marijuana, for instance, they can come in and do a search warrant on your home, raid your house, and basically take all your money, everything you own, freeze your bank accounts, and whatever they can get in their hands and in their trucks, they're going to take from you. And that occurs all without any kind of conviction, criminal conviction, just merely a charge and a file of the forfeiture on behalf of the law enforcement.
And where this gets difficult sometimes to understand is we start getting these terms thrown around at the federal level. A couple of them were equitable sharing and adoptive forfeitures. And could you tell us what's going on in those terms?
As far as equitable sharing, and I think they mean the funds are used to go back into the community, namely into law enforcement for training and equipment and things like that. And that's how they justify all this, but it's really becomes against our rights as American citizens with as little proof as they need to go into your house and take everything you own. It's something that's in desperate need of reform, not enhancement, as Jeff Sessions is trying to do.
Yeah, I had read a statistic that said in 2014, the federal asset forfeitures actually exceeded the amount of property that was stolen by burglars and robbers in 2014. The cops are stealing more than the robbers. And part of this, that adoptive forfeiture allows, you talk about us needing to reform these laws. Numerous states have come up with laws saying you have to have a criminal conviction first. What is this adoptive forfeiture that allows the states to get around that?
Well, they operate then under federal law, and a lot of that goes through, they have these drug task force out there that usually have a federal agent or two on them, and then they just go operate under federal guidelines and laws. And federally, marijuana is still illegal. There isn't not even a provision for medical. And with it being illegal federally, they use their federal powers to come in and seize everybody's assets, and then the feds don't want to charge them, so they just charge it at a state level by the local prosecutor, but do the forfeitures under the guise of federal rule and law.
Wow. So even if your state does the right thing and requires a criminal conviction to seize your assets, through this adoptive forfeiture, they can seize the assets through the federal law of marijuana being illegal. And then the equitable sharing allows the feds to then share back the proceeds with those state cops. It's an end run around state democracy, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. It was like you said, a lot of states have started making reforms to the civil asset forfeiture laws, and this is definitely a step backwards. To we got to get out of this mindset that the government can just come in and take all your stuff and ruin your life over some marijuana, especially. Yeah. And you know, in the states that are going to require criminal conviction, I think there's here in Michigan there's something in the legislature right now that's trying to get passed that would require a criminal conviction. And you know, if they're going to be able to do it, I guess, you know, that should be, you know, what they have to abide by, and with a criminal conviction before they can, you know, seize and keep somebody's money and property.
Wow, what a novel idea. A court should actually adjudicate that you committed a crime before we can take the proceeds from it. That's some radical thinking there, Steve.
I've been told I'm a progressive thinker.
I guess so. Well, let's look back to your experience. You spent 20 years in various service in law enforcement, from patrol to narcotics to detective work. Did this policing for profit affect how your department might go after crimes? Like, you know, pick someone who's going to give you a better haul than someone who's maybe poorer?
No, you know what? I would see where I saw a lot of failure in the civil asset forfeiture reform, or not reform, civil asset forfeiture, was that it was more poor people, or you know, lower middle class, or, you know, struggling people, that were the ones that got hit the hardest by this, believe it or not. Uh-huh. We had in Wayne County, Michigan, which was where Canton Township was located, that the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office had a program called Operation Push-Off. So you could, under their Operation Push-Off, you could seize somebody's vehicle for really personal use amounts of marijuana or other drugs, and you would seize their car under Operation Push-Off, and the person could get their car back. It's usually, you know, a car that is, you know, struggling itself and having a hard time getting the person back and forth to work, but we would seize the car, and they could go get their car back if they paid the prosecutor's office $900. And it was, at our department, that was almost like a stat. It was a good statistic right along with the arrest. You know, you got your push-off on it, which would give you credit for a forfeiture, and you got some drugs off the street, and, you know, it's, you know, the officers would get praised for doing stuff like that. It was good police work that guy just went out and did. And meanwhile, this guy didn't get to work tonight. You've seized his car that he's never going to be able to afford to go pay $900 to get it back. And those are the kinds of people I saw getting hit hard with this, you know, and that's the forfeitures that was going on. Those were, I never worked in a narcotics unit. I worked in our department's detective bureau, but that's where I would see, you know, these low-level forfeitures that were occurring most of the time. I mean, we weren't getting big, you know, drug rings and drug dealers and all that, where,
which again, when they came up with that asset forfeiture, they said it was to go after the cocaine kingpins, the Miami Vice yachts, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, for major crime organization type things. I mean, that's what it was intended for, not to be, you know, kicking someone when they're down even further, you know.
Yeah, but as it works out, you know, you go after the kingpins, they've got money for lawyers. You go after somebody with a beat down, you know, Honda, they're not going to take it to court and fight it.
No, because they can't afford an attorney that'll, you know, fight it for them. They'll get a court appointed that'll get them to plead to something, you know. So,
yeah. Well, it's an insidious aspect of our criminal justice system that definitely needs to be reformed, and this call by the Attorney General to have more of this asset forfeiture is certainly retrograde and taking us back to a place we don't need to go to. Sergeant Steve Miller, I want to thank you for being here on our Police for Reform segment. Before I let you go, do you have any other contact information or websites you'd like to tell people about?
If people are interested in what we were talking about tonight, a big part of it, you can go to leap.cc, and that's Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and we are all about looking at the various areas of law enforcement that are in need of reform, and how we can publicly speak about these and hopefully change people's minds and and get law enforcement back in the right direction.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is brought to you by Cannabis Kamikaze, a professional licensed producer from Canada producing 3 pounds per light. Follow Cannabis Kamikaze on Twitter at Cannabis Kamikaze. That's at Cannabis, Kamikaze. Cannabis Kamikaze.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This whole country needs to not be so lackadaisical about drugs. They say much of the addiction starts with marijuana.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana. Today in the United States, polls regularly show that 3 in 5 Americans support the legalization of adult access to cannabis. Support for medical marijuana regularly approaches and exceeds 9 in 10 Americans. But after 80 years of failed prohibition, the government wants to bring back the worst excesses of the drug war 1980s. On lots like totally bogus, It's not tubular.
Health Cannabinoid, your ACMPR experts. Consultation services for medical cannabis. Visit healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. That's www.healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. Health Cannabinoid.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhale.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Radical Rant. Back in 2012, Colorado and Washington were the first states to legalize the adult use, possession, and purchase of cannabis. But only one of those states, Colorado, legalized the home cultivation of cannabis for personal purposes. Washington state, infamously in its I-502, forbade home cultivation. This has been a problem in the state, especially since in the succeeding elections, Oregon, Alaska, California, Nevada, Massachusetts, Maine, and Washington, D.C. have all allowed the home cultivation of cannabis. It's also problematic in that the state of Washington for years has allowed the medical home cultivation of cannabis. I guess somehow if you're healthy, those plants are a big problem. But this is something that's weighed heavily on the state ever since their legalization in 2012, and now they're looking to do something about it because there's a lot of public request for recognition of home cultivation rights. So the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board passed a directive, 5131, that asked them to start studying how we could put together home grow in the state of Washington. The recommendations had to come in by December 1st, 2017. That was the deadline. Boom, they've come in. I've got the copy right in front of me here. And in their study, they point out that they spoke with other states. They went to Colorado, Oregon, and Rhode Island to check out what's going on there. You might be thinking, wait a minute, Rhode Island? Rhode Island's not a legal state. Yeah. Bear with me. They also checked out with local governments by holding a webinar with the Association of Washington Cities and Washington State Association of Counties. They spoke with law enforcement, Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. They spoke with the Prevention and Public Health Community, Department of Social Health Services, Department of Health, Washington State Healthy Youth Coalition, and prevention groups, drug prevention groups. And they invited public comment starting on September 13th. They took it all the way through October 11th, the public comment period. And they held a public hearing on October 4th. And with all this study, going through all these other states, talking to all these agencies, they came up with 3 possibilities for how there might be home grow. Number 1 possibility, we could have a tightly regulated recreational home grow market or home grow regulation in Washington State under a state framework. The second option would be that we could have a state statute framework. The state sets the basic boundaries of the law, but then the local authorities, cities and counties, would have the authority to regulate recreational home grows. And the third option is to just let people home grow. No, sorry, just kidding. The third option, status quo. Keep things the way they are. Now, it seems to me when you have been directed to study the options for changing a system, one of those options can't be keep the system the way it is. That seems to me you're kind of padding it a little bit, but all right, that's an option. Keep things the way they are. People are criminals if they're healthy and they're growing plants inside their home. That's one option. But let me get to what they mean by tightly regulated when they talk about this. The first option, before we get there, I also want to point out that they this Washington State report listed how much sales and revenue Washington State has gotten from legalized adult cannabis sales. This is the period from July 2014 to October 2017. Their sales started in July of 2014. They have received $684.4 million in excise tax revenue and $169.6 million in retail sales tax revenue, for a total of $854 million in tax revenue from marijuana in Washington State. $854 million. So, by the Sabat conjecture, where every $1 in tax costs you $10 in costs, my God, Washington State has suffered $8.54 billion of social harm from marijuana legalization. Yeah, you probably missed all the reports on it, right? The sky falling and productivity plummeting and people jumping from skyscrapers in Seattle because they've gone to hell in a handbasket because of legalization, right? Nah, never happened. Didn't come about in Washington State. But let's get to what they're recommending. That first option is a tightly regulated recreational home grow state framework. That is, the state would set the law and regulate home grows. They propose that there be a system of permitting and tracking plants at home grows. That's right. You'd have to go to the state, get a permit to be able to grow your cannabis plants, and then you have to report in online probably every month to the state how many plants you grew, are they mature, are they immature, how much did you harvest from them, what did you do with the harvest, where did it go? And this is on what they're considering to allow 4 plants per household. Like what we have here in Oregon. You can grow 4 plants per household, but we don't make you get a permit or track them. They want to set up a tracking system for 4 plants in a household. And you have to get a permit for it. You don't got a permit, you're still a criminal. You still go to jail. Also, they want to add a provision to this that someone who is over their 4-plant limit can have all their plants seized by cops. So if you got 4 plants, you're fine. If you got 5 plants, they take all 5. In Oregon, where we allow 4 plants, no permit, no state tracking, if you got 5 plants, cops can take 1. You're still allowed to have 4. So we are talking about a system they are putting together. That's their That's their least regulated system they're proposing, folks. This is the lenient system they're talking about. Home grow tracking, home grow permitting, 4 plants. Cops can take them all if you got too many. That's the lenient option they're thinking. The second option they're thinking of is state statute framework, local authority, recreational home grows. So basically the same thing. Got to get a permit. You got to report and track. You got to track and report to the state. You get 4 plants per household. Cops can take all the plants if you're just one over. And this is where it changes. The local jurisdictions would have opt-in or opt-out for local recreational grows. The difference between this, opt-in would mean nobody can get a permit, nobody can do any home growing unless their city or county decides to set up a system and give them a permit. Opt-out means everybody can get a permit and home grow unless their city or county decides to ban it. So in the first situation with opt-in, it's the city has to decide to want it. In opt-out, the city has to decide to ban it. Well, you know how that's going to turn out? It's going to turn out just like Oregon. Everywhere east of the Cascades is going to either not opt in or they're going to opt out. And so everyone east of the Cascades is still going to be a criminal if they're home growing their 4 plants. That's exactly what's going to happen. So sorry, Washington State Liquor Control Board. This is a major fail from me when it comes to trying to decide what to do with home grow. This is stricter set of provisions than any of the other 7 states in Washington, D.C. that allow home grows, that all basically say, hey, grow some plants at home, keep it down to 3, 4, 6 of them or so, don't sell them, and we'll leave you alone. Once again, Washington State proves that if legalization can be done badly, they'll find a way to do it.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ Belville. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.